Hello, friends. Thanks for joining me, and welcome to the Transformational Peace Podcast. I'm Dr. Lee. In this episode, we're going to answer 9 really great questions that were sent from our previous podcast. You're not broken. You're in survival mode. And thank you for clicking on this video. And if it provides you with encouragement, please click the subscribe button below. Also, please share this video with someone you feel might find this information helpful. So let's jump right in with the first question. How can I tell if I'm being truly kind or if I'm people-pleasing out of fear? Well, first of all, kindness is motivated by genuine care for others and aligns with our own values and boundaries. We give to or help others because we freely choose to out of compassion for the other person. And most importantly, we remain comfortable with ourselves and the outcome even if the other person disagrees with us. However, people-pleasing out of fear is driven by anxiety about rejection, criticism, or conflict. We say yes when we want to say no. We alter our opinions to avoid disapproval from others, or we sacrifice our own needs to secure acceptance, again, from others. Some signs we may be people-pleasing include feeling resentful after the conversation or engagement with others, a persistent need for external validation from others, immediate compliance despite our own internal discomfort, and avoidance of honest conversations. If our actions leave us emotionally drained and disconnected from our own values, or we are constantly anxious about others' responses, then our responses are more likely fear-based and people-pleasing than rooted in kindness. So our next question is, why do I feel so guilty when I say no to people, even when I'm exhausted? Feeling guilty when we say no, even when we're exhausted, often comes from a mix of learned expectations, fear of disappointing others, and an internalized belief that our worth depends on being helpful or available. If we grew up in an environment where saying yes earned approval or where needs were only met when we prioritized others, then clearly refusing requests from others can trigger anxiety, guilt, and shame as if we've done something wrong. Social and cultural messages that equate kindness with self-sacrifice amplify this guilt, and when we attempt to set a boundary, our minds may catastrophize the consequences we imagine. Consequently, we imagine rejection, conflict, or loss of a relationship, and our immediate emotional response is typically guilt. Additionally, the physical exhaustion that accompanies this negative spiral reduces our emotional bandwidth and self-regulation. This clearly compromises our relational capacity and makes it harder to hold firm to reasons for saying no and easier for automatic guilt reactions to override our ability for calm judgment. Recognizing these influences and practicing compassionate self-talk, small boundary setting steps, and clarity about our limits can help weaken this reflexive guilt over time. So this is our third question. Where did this habit of putting everyone else first actually come from in my life? Wow, I really love this question. Such a great question. The habit of consistently putting everyone else often grows out of our early learning and survival strategies. As a child, if we received approval, safety, or affection only when we were helpful or compliant, we learned to equate our self-worth with meeting others' needs. Family systems that rewarded caretaking or minimized individual needs reinforced the message that self-sacrifice is our path to belonging. Through this, we learn that certain social and cultural role expectations only further validate our selflessness while stigmatizing healthy boundaries. Additionally, our anxiety about rejection or conflict can drive us to prioritize others in relationships to keep the relationship intact. Over time, these repeated choices become automatic patterns that feel safer than asserting our own needs. I'll give an example of what I've seen in the past with various individuals I've worked with. I recall one young mother who would wake up before dawn to prepare breakfast, lunches, and lay out clothes for her 3 young children. She would then squeeze in a quiet moment to pray while downing a cup of coffee before driving them all to different schools. Often at work, she would cover a coworker's shift without complaint so they could attend to their own personal business. And to top this off, she would typically spend her lunch break checking on an elderly neighbor's groceries. I think most of us can see that while helping others is a noble endeavor, this individual, and I only said half of her daily hectic schedule, often postponed her own needs for days until they could wait no longer. This clearly left her feeling anxious and depressed. And here's the fourth question, which, interestingly enough, I hear this somewhat frequently. What are some of the small ways I can start setting boundaries without feeling selfish? First and foremost, begin by naming one small specific boundary and try it for a week, such as turning our phone to Do Not Disturb during meals or saying, I can't take that on right now, to that one extra request someone may make. Doing this reminds ourselves that protecting our time and energy helps us show up better prepared to engage with others. Additionally, practice brief, kind phrases. Instead of long explanations, use simple statements like, "I'm not able to help today," or "I really need 30 minutes to myself." These statements are useful in that they are honest without being harsh. Another technique could be starting off with a low-stakes social situation while putting up boundaries and notice how it feels. Adjust and pair each boundary we set up with a compassionate affirmation to ourselves. For example, "I know setting limits is healthy and necessary for myself." This helps us learn how to counter any guilt we may experience in our interaction with others. Finally, enlist one supportive person to check in with us about our progress. Having a friend or ally normalizes the change and reduces feelings of selfishness. All right, on to the next question. How do I stop replaying conversations in my head and worrying if I will upset someone? First and foremost, we can start by grounding ourselves in the present. When a conversation replays in our mind, pause and take 3 slow breaths. Then ask ourselves whether we have clear evidence that we actually upset the person we were talking with, or if we are interpreting their words through our own worry. Remind ourselves that thoughts are not facts, and label the replaying as anxiety or rumination to create some distance from it. If there's a concrete issue, plan a brief, direct follow-up with the other person. This could be one calm message or question to clarify our intent. An example could be, "Hey, I noticed earlier during our conversation that there might have been some concern regarding our discussion." If there's no clear reason to reach out to the person we imagine we may have upset, practice redirecting your attention to a small task or sensory anchor. A sensory anchor could be simply noticing how our feet feel on the floor or noticing 5 things we can visually see around us until the urge to replay the conversation fades. Over time, the goal is to build a habit of compassion towards ourselves. Accept that people sometimes react in ways we can't control, and that experiencing occasional discomfort does not necessarily mean we've harmed someone. If these patterns persist or disrupt our daily life, consider talking with a counselor to learn tailored techniques for managing rumination and improving communication confidence. Okay, our 6th question is an interesting one, and yes, I do get asked this question quite often also. Why do I feel like I have to earn love and acceptance by being agreeable all the time? Again, feeling like we have to earn love or acceptance by being agreeable all the time comes from early relational experiences where approval was conditional. Praise, safety, or connection arrived only when we met others' expectations or kept the peace. Over time, this pattern becomes internalized through developmental conditioning. We learn to monitor reactions, hide disagreement, and prioritize others' comfort to avoid rejection or conflict. This created a false belief that our true needs and opinions are not that valuable. Anxiety about losing relationships or being judged reinforced our people-pleasing behavior, and the temporary relief it brought prevented us from testing whether authentic connections are possible. This unhealthy dynamic erodes our self-worth and can leave us feeling unseen or exhausted, because love based on performance never affirms our inherent dignity as a person. Okay, and now for question number 7. Is it possible to stop people-pleasing without losing friends or being misunderstood? Yes, it is possible to stop people-pleasing without losing friends or being misunderstood. However, it requires clear communication, consistent boundaries, and a willingness to accept temporary discomfort as our relationships recalibrate. In other words, when we express our needs calmly and honestly, most people will respect and adjust to our healthier relational style. In other words, healthier boundaries help us show up more genuinely. Conversely, those who withdraw from the relationship when we put up boundaries may have valued the relationship primarily for the convenience rather than the mutual support. Excellent point. I'll give some examples of how this works. One concrete way to stop people-pleasing without losing friends is to practice honest and kind boundary setting in low-stakes situations. For instance, when a friend asks for extra time or even a last-minute favor that might stretch our time, respond with a clear but compassionate statement. This might sound like, I care about you and I want to be present, but I can't add that to my schedule right now. And then follow up immediately with, I'd be happy to help next week or support you in any other way I could. This communication respects both our needs and the relationship. It also provides an alternative that shows we still value them and models consistent limits so friends learn what to expect. Most healthy friendships adapt when we're steady and considerate about our boundaries. So question 8, presents a great idea about how to handle a different subset of the fight or flight response. And the question is, how do I know when my nervous system is stuck in fawn response? This is a great question. So I'm going to define the fawn response first. The fawn response, also known as the please and appease response, is a trauma-based coping mechanism where individuals avoid conflict or fear by becoming overly helpful, submissive, and compliant to others' needs. Consequently, we may be stuck in the fawn response when we chronically prioritize others' needs to avoid conflict, or we frequently apologize without being at fault. Through this, we find it hard to set boundaries with others. Other signs of fawn response include changing our opinions or behaviors to please people, suppressing our own anger or discomfort, or even feeling anxious about disappointing others. When we're in the fawn response, we may experience physical symptoms like tension, fatigue, or a tight chest after social interactions. Emotionally, we might struggle to identify our own wants and values and have a tendency to rely on external approval for self-worth. Furthermore, we often notice that relationships feel one-sided or performative rather than reciprocal. Okay, the ninth question will be the last question I'll take for this episode, and wow, again, what a great question. What does it mean to be my authentic self when I've spent so long pleasing others? How do I say no when I feel like everyone expects me to say yes? To be our authentic selves after years of people-pleasing means slowly uncovering and claiming the parts of us that were muted to keep others comfortable. This means not just uncovering our true feelings, preferences, limits, and convictions, but also allowing them to guide our choices even when they disappoint or unsettle people we care about. This involves learning to recognize the difference between genuine kindness versus compliance born of fear. And we accomplish this by practicing small acts of honest expression and setting boundaries that protect our inner life without becoming defensive or reactive. And being authentic doesn't require dramatic rebellion. It often looks like quiet consistency. In other words, it means saying no when our well is low and asking for what we need and choosing relationships that respect us. Over time, authenticity builds trust with ourselves and others, reduces the exhausting labor of performative approval, and opens space for deeper, more reciprocal connections grounded in who we actually are rather than who we are expected to be. Well, that's all for today, and remember, a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. Grace and peace unto you. I'm Dr. Lee.